After another weekend of multiple mass shootings across our country, we have some new solutions being proposed by members of the GOP.
I seem to remember a lot of security each time that I walked into the White House for work. Armed Secret Service, dogs, metal detectors. In fact, there's an armed Secret Service officer just steps away from the press secretary's office. I would know, I sat there. But that's the place where Karine Jean-Pierre works. It's impenetrable. What possible reason could you have for not protecting our children, our true diamonds?
And they love to propose solutions. They love to propose solutions that they know are untenable, because we know that they aren't actually interested in solving the problem. If they were, they would just solve the problem. If they were, they would at least try to implement the obvious solution, the solution that the majority of Americans from both sides of the aisle are desperate for. But they don't even try.
Bring in veterans and retired law enforcement to serve as a security officer at a school. They know how to use weapons. They know how to de-escalate situations. I've talked to a lot of them. They like this idea. They are grandparents like we are. My husband and I are grandparents, and they want to be there to help protect children.
I want to put up a poll that we just had on possible gun reforms here in the U.S. This is just out from Fox News. When you ask people what they would favor, background checks for guns, enforcing existing gun laws, legal age to 21, requiring mental health checks, flagging people for danger to self, all of those score at more than 80%.
Instead, the governor of Texas is saying he's going to get to the root of the problem, which certainly isn't the unencumbered access to guns in his state, it's mental health.
What Texas is doing in a big-time way, we are working to address that anger and violence by going to its root cause, which is addressing the mental health problems behind it.
The governor of Texas is going to somehow tackle mental health issues in his state. But we already know that he's not going to. The GOP doesn't seem to be concerned with mental health issues at all, except in times when it's politically convenient for them to be. Like, for example, immediately after someone, usually a white male, shoots a bunch of people. The mall shooting that just took place in Texas was orchestrated and executed, incidentally, not by a white man, but by a white supremacist nonetheless. Along with his views on white supremacy, he wore the same patch that the Proud Boys wore when they stormed the Capitol on January 6th, a patch with the letters RWDS, which stands for Right-Wing Death Squad. He had made social media posts displaying neo-Nazi and white supremacist views. Coincidentally, the majority of his victims were Asian. And he's not the first mass shooter we've seen to have been radicalized by right-wing talking points, groups, and ideologies. It's funny how we keep seeing a link between Nazis and the right wing of this country. I'm sure it's just a coincidence, though. And I'm sure it's just an oversight that no member of the GOP that I know of has spoken out to denounce this evident correlation. Unfortunately, what is more likely to happen is that members of the GOP will gaslight everyone who can see as clear as day what's happening and tell them that that's not what's happening. Trump said it himself, what you're seeing is not what's happening. Gaslighting, by the way, is definitely not good for a population's mental health.
What you're seeing and what you're reading is not what's happening.
If the GOP really wanted to tackle mental health because they truly believed it to be the root of the gun problem in this country, surely they would allocate some resources toward mental health care. But they haven't, and they won't. They'll just keep talking about it to ease concerns of the people who still hold them in good faith. We'll do it soon. Mental health, it's a top priority for us. Just hang on, we'll get to it. We've got a plan. We won't tell you what the plan is, but we've definitely got one. Mental health is a problem. Last year, House Republicans voted against the bipartisan Safer Communities Act, an act that allowed for over $2 billion to be allocated to mental health services in schools and better learning environments. Mental health is a problem. House Republicans voted against the Bipartisan Background Checks Act, an act that establishes new background check requirements for firearm transfers between private parties, specifically with the intention of keeping guns out of the hands of those who might be considered a danger to themselves. House Republicans voted against it, but Senate Republicans did them one better and blocked it from even getting a vote. Mental health is a problem. House Republicans voted against the American Rescue Plan, which allocated $12 billion towards mental health care services, which was deemed necessary after the pandemic. And I'm sure in all of these instances that they had their reasons for voting against all of these things. There was probably a line or two in the brief that they took issue with, which is totally understandable. We'll just keep waiting for them to figure it out. Governor Abbott derided citizens for wanting a quick solution to this gun problem. He also derided Texans for owning fewer guns than Californians, but I digress. He says that we're not willing to play the long game in the fight against gun violence. We're impatient. People are dying, but we need to be more patient. Of course, that doesn't make any sense because this problem has been a problem for at least 20 years. And in that time, the problem has only ever gotten worse, never better. 20 years. That's an entire generation. That's an entire generation that has lived in the greatest country in the world under the threat of random gun violence in what should be their safe spaces, their schools, their churches, their shopping malls, their movie theaters. So Abbott wants to commit to better mental health care in Texas. Well, since he took office in 2015, the state has invested $25 billion into mental health care. Now that might sound significant, but in 2022, Texas was ranked number 50 out of 50 states in access to mental health services. Where's the money gone? As of today, 98% of Texas counties were either wholly or partially designated as mental health professional shortage areas by the federal government. And by the way, polls show that 76% of Texans, blue and red, left and right, 76% want some form of gun control. I'll also mention that Republicans aren't exclusively gun owners, especially not in Texas. Plenty of Democratic Texans are gun owners. Also, by the way, numerous studies have found that there isn't a strong causal relationship between mass gun violence and mental health. For example, in one study, the FBI confirmed that only 25% of active shooters had been diagnosed with a mental illness. Now, I want to clarify that we're talking about mental health as it pertains to mass shooters specifically. I also want to mention that diagnosed mental illness is a very specific thing. It means that, for one, the individual sought professional help. A lot of people don't, or maybe they can't afford to. For another, one doesn't need to be diagnosed with a psychiatric illness to suffer from some form of poor mental health. But Abbott says people are angry, and that's a problem. I wonder why people are angry, Abbott. What are you doing to actually ameliorate some of that anger? Are you selling out the power grid? Are you disparaging windmills and other forms of green energy? Are you interfering in local elections? Are you actively making it even easier for Texans to have access to guns? Are you making life hell for people seeking abortions during life-threatening pregnancies? Was your lieutenant governor openly willing to sacrifice the state's elderly population for the sake of the Texas economy? Speaking of sacrificing the elderly, let's quickly jump over to Tennessee. Republican Senator Marsha Blackburn has her own idea on how we can curb gun violence in schools. Blackburn went on Fox News recently to peddle her Safe Schools Act, which would establish a $900 million grant to, quote, harden schools with better security. We have school districts testing out 4-day school weeks because they have such a severe teacher shortage. We have teachers who are working 2 or 3 jobs just to live. We have schools that are severely underfunded, but somehow our federal government has $900 million to spend on a bunk solution to a major problem. For what? Optics? This is the richest country in the world, or so they keep saying. The people who voted for Trump in 2016 said they wanted a businessman in control because businessmen know how to manage money. They know how to stretch and save a dollar, and they know how to spend money efficiently and effectively. Well, none of that seemed to happen while Trump was the president, and it's certainly not happening now. All the money in the world isn't worth anything if it's being mismanaged. And they wonder why nobody wants to pay taxes. All right, that's it for me. If you got anything out of this, please like and subscribe to the channel, and be sure to follow me on Instagram and TikTok. Thanks.